Bonjour à tous. That's about all my French that I can get up with these days. So we used to get French in school in Belgium. We still do, but I mostly lost all of it or forgot about most of it. So that's about it for my French. So I'll be continuing in English. My name is Yannick Reekmans. I work as a cloud solution architect, mainly focused on Microsoft 365 at Qubix, which is a consulting company in Belgium. I'm also an Office development MVP, and there I mainly focus on what is SharePoint development, Teams development, and the Power Platform, or whatever pro devs can bring to the Power Platform. So this is a good session to discover that. You can find my Twitter and my blog on the slides, or at least on the first slide. If you have any questions, there will be time at the end to do them. And otherwise, feel free to reach out on Twitter, where I'm most active, or maybe post a comment on my blog. So when I submitted this session, I named it Discover All Opportunities for a Pro Dev in the Power Platform. But a friend told me that it's not a very sexy title. So for the future of these sessions, I will be using Become a Maker of Makers and get rid of the lame parts of development by leveraging the Power Platform. So thank you for that. She's in the call as well. And first of all, let's see the agenda. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll see whatever a pro dev can bring to the table in the Power Platform. In the end, we'll do a small wrap up and stay to the end because I do have stickers to give away, like I do with all my recent online talks. So there might be stickers in there for you if you submit the form at the end of this presentation. So we know about the next slide. This is not new. Microsoft loves recently, or since a couple of years, all of these technologies. They go cross-platform, they do new things like AI, they continue with all of the new innovations on Azure, and in the end, they love their developers. They have the best tooling available for developers, the best tooling on the market with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. There's nothing equivalent to what they bring to the table. Microsoft really loves their developers. And most recently, they changed their narrative, not really from Microsoft loves the developers, but they extended it to say that also the Power Platform loves developers. So they're bringing, or they are investing a lot of time and effort into marketing the Power Platform for developers as well. Last week, there was a session from Microsoft about how Azure partners should get on board with the Power Platform, things like that. So they're investing really, really hard into bringing what they call pro developers, people that are trained and studied for being a developer, to the Power Platform. The question is, do developers really love the Power Platform? And it's a challenge there, because as a developer, I'm a developer as well, we tend to see, without disrespect for all of the makers or citizen developers in the audience, we'll look at the Power Platform and specifically Power Apps and Power Automate as clicking and dragging boxes and putting stuff in there, but not as real development. Now, in the end, what we like to achieve is the same thing. As a developer or a citizen developer or a maker, we like to create stuff. The thing that's different is what tools we use to get to the end result. And in some cases, and that's where we have to find a middle ground, in some cases, the Power Platform approach is the much better sensical approach over custom development. So we have to find each other somewhere in the middle and do or find a good way to connect the dots between both the citizen developer and the pro developer world. So I believe that developers should love the Power Platform. And there are a lot of good reasons why we have to make an effort to look at the Power Platform as a real development platform and something that can be used to create real applications, not just clickety-clackety, drag and drop some simple use cases or demos. It can really be used for enterprise applications as well. And why is that? This is a slide from Microsoft. This is the one probably that you've seen in some Microsoft presentations before. And it's about 500 million new apps will be built in the next 5 years, which apparently is, according to Satya Nadella, more than all apps that have been built in the last 40 years. So in the next 5 years, we will build more than all applications we have been building in the last 40 years. There will be more demand for mobile applications, and IT will never be able to deliver those. And most of the organizations have problems finding technical talent because our criteria for finding technical talent who can build an application are different than what we see in the available on the job market. So we will have to make some changes there. And a study shows that 65% of enterprise application development will be low-code or in the low-code category by 2024, which also means that by 2030, apparently, we will come short of more than 1 million software developers to meet demand. So that's why I say that we, as a pro developer, have a responsibility, or a lot of responsibilities. We have to, to say it a little bit in a graphical way, get our head out of our asses and look at the Power Platform and don't feel better than the business developers or the citizen developers and say or see that the Power Platform really is a useful tool. And I firmly believe that developers need to get on board with low-code tools. For years, and maybe since forever, IT has been in the driver's seat. So IT has been for the last, for as long as I can remember that we're building applications, IT is the driver in all of these projects. They're getting the budgets, they're determining what the business gets, maybe even what the business doesn't want or doesn't need, but IT had the budget and some new application needs to be developed. And more recently, IT has been doing a good job in trying to understand what the business needs. So they make an effort, try to understand whatever the business wants to or needs from an application. But now the table is turning. IT isn't getting the budgets anymore. The big budgets are at the business side. They determine what they need to get their business done, to improve their productivity. And if IT can't deliver or can't be a good partner, they now have the tools as well to create things themselves. And then you have a risk because those people aren't trained for creating applications, so they will struggle with things that are basic and easy for us, or look basic and simple to us with regards to application development. They will struggle, and they still do. Like we struggled to understand what they do and how we need to create an application for them. They will struggle because on the other way, they know their business, they know what they want to achieve, but they don't really understand how they achieve it in a very interesting, stable, long-term way. So we have a responsibility to adapt and evolve, embrace this change, and understand what our value could be when the business starts creating their own applications. How we can elevate those applications to a higher level and bring our expertise to the table as well. So what does that mean? What can you bring as a pro developer to the table when we talk about application development in the Power Platform? Microsoft focuses mostly on the trained professional part. So you can do stuff in Azure or somewhere else, all of the things that you learned in school during your years of building applications, .NET code, JavaScript code, things like that. That's what they focus on. And all the extensibility points that are available in the Power Platform. So they focus on where you as a pro developer can create stuff to extend the Power Platform. Now, I also want to talk about being the experiential expert. Experiences. You have been doing this for years, or most of you have been doing this for years as a pro developer. We have, well, Microsoft never talks about those. you've been doing stuff for years and you have picked up a lot of things while doing that. Not just writing better code, but also how to approach app development. Think 7 months into the future about issues that might pop up when you want to deploy somewhere from one environment to another environment. Issues with stability. What people do, it's the same as with a junior developer. If you get a junior developer in your company and you tell them to create something, the happy flow will most probably work. You put in whatever works, whatever has been defined before, you put all of the information into the application, and it will run its happy flow. But users never do that. But the junior dev, as well as the citizen developer, needs to be trained to think how to build an application for people that tend to not really do how you intended to build your application. It's a training exercise. It's an experience thing that we have learned over the years to think about. Yes, we can only enter a number between 0 and 10. Well, the first user that gets your application will enter 11. That's just how it is. And we try to catch those use cases or those issues upfront. We have a sense of time investment. When you want to do this, or this is the scope of this application, this is the goal of the application, it will take this much time, give or take a little bit. But we get a good feeling of that just because of our experiences. They're not very tactical. You cannot feel those experiences. Those are things that are inside you. When things go wrong, we have a certain approach to debugging. It's all of those things that citizen developers have to learn and that we as a pro developer can help them with. Being methodical in their debugging experiences, help them out how to figure out where an issue lies. They're more or less the same as with a junior developer. And those experiences, they will need from day one or at least day 10 when they do their own development on the Power Platform, they will struggle with all of those. And if we want to make the development on the Power Platform as easy as possible for them, let them create a lot of applications and make sure that they can deliver value fast for their business unit or for their group of people that they work with, we can help them understand all of these things just because of our experience. You don't even need to know the Power Platform to help them with scoping the application, thinking about an app design, what will work, what won't work, just because you've been doing this for years. And don't underestimate the value that could bring to people that are really new to this type of work. This is not something that they chose to do. It's something that they can do now. And they didn't train for it. They didn't go through all of the hazing rituals that we go through when we do pro development. We can help them so that they can be very, very efficient at the beginning. Now, about the trained professional part. So let's see whatever is possible to extend the Power Platform. The first thing, of course, was very important, but also you want to know what you can build as a pro developer on the Power Platform. You see a lot of icons here, but I will run through them as well. And there's a unicorn on there because that's the icon that Microsoft uses to describe custom UI. Make it pretty. So when we talk about the Power Platform ships out of the box with a lot of controls for its services. So there are a lot of controls that interact with the existing services in the Power Platform or in Microsoft 365 already. You can visualize them on the page. There's this grid view and buttons, and all of the basic components are in there. They don't look bad, but they aren't really the most advanced controls to visualize information on your page. If you go to a designer, they will create nice looking Gantt chart views, for example, with special colors. And if you need to implement this with the out-of-the-box controls in the Power Platform, it will be difficult. Companies want a richer and more tailored experience when they create their applications. It has to be more like it belongs within the look and feel of the company. And then there are tools available for you to create these custom components that do a specific task or look and feel like they belong and in that application. I know, Louise, a Gantt chart never helped anyone, but it does look great on the slide. You have to agree with that. So when you create or when you want to create this custom UX component for within a Power App, or you have one option, which is the PowerApps Component Framework. So the PowerApps Component Framework is a tool set that's been made available by Microsoft, where you can create through familiar like languages, development languages, you can create your custom looking UI and make the applications pop out and nice to use for the end users. These custom components that are created by the PowerApps Component Framework can be used in model-driven apps at the moment. And when you enable the preview features in the Canvas apps, you can also create or use them in a Canvas apps experience as well. And when you create these visuals, they can be shared across different applications. So this could mean that as a pro developer, we create a common set of visuals and tools or components that you just deliver to all of your citizen developers or all your makers. And you say, this is our global navigation. Every application that we create has to have this navigation or this header bar or this footer in there or anything to make sure that everything that gets created within your organization has a familiar look and feel. So they can be created by pro developers and then shared with citizen developers, and they can use it without writing a single line of code. Now, I've been talking about the PowerApps Component Framework, but there's a similar approach to creating custom visuals for Power BI as well. Now, when you look under the covers of the PowerApps Component Framework, it's essentially an extension based on TypeScript. So you use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code to create TypeScript code. It's as simple as that. If you've been using TypeScript for other things like SharePoint Framework development or Microsoft Teams development, you can get used to this PowerApps Component Framework development as well. Now, it is different, of course, than Teams development and SharePoint Framework development. It's a different tool chain, so you need different APIs and helper functions, and you need to get used to it. But in essence, you're still writing just TypeScript. I say just TypeScript because it's a rather simple object-driven approach for developers, so we get the hang of it rather quickly. And this development toolchain, PowerApps Component Framework, can be extended by using React, for example, for your look and feel, which also gives you the opportunity to bring in Office UI Fabric React or the new name Fluent UI, so that you can bring in the same look and feel, the same components that are already used to build the UI in Dynamics, for example. So if you create a PowerApps Component Framework component and embed it in Dynamics, you can make it look and feel like it really belongs on that page. And it comes with command line tools for building and testing. So it really is tailor-made for end-to-end pro developers that need to do real-life debugging with real-life refresh of new code that gets created, and you can see the results immediately. In the end, you can use a command line to package it up and deploy it right inside your application. So it can be imported in a Canvas app or deployed as a solution inside Dynamics. There are a lot of those components available already. So there is the PCF gallery, which basically is pcf.gallery as a URL. And a lot of people have been creating, the community has been creating a lot of those PowerApps Component Framework components. So you can just go there, download the components. Some of them come as a package, so you have to use them as is. Some of them also distribute the source code, so you can tweak it yourself. Let's take a look at the command line itself. So if you go or install the PowerApps Component Framework, everything is driven by a command line application. For technical reasons, this command line application is only available on Windows, although most of it is cross-platform development. So you know that when you do TypeScript development, I saw that the whole tool chain, or showed that the whole tool chain for the PowerApps Component Framework is built on NPM, Node.js, TypeScript, and things like that. All of them open source technologies. So you would expect the PowerApps Component Framework to work on Linux or macOS as well. Now, the problem is that the Dynamics SDKs that are used in the background, they still aren't cross-platform. So they only run on .NET 4.6 point something. So that means that for now, the only way to go end-to-end with the PowerApps Component Framework is by using a Windows development machine. There have been some endeavors into bringing this PowerApps Component Framework CLI to, for example, a Microsoft 365 CLI. But the problem is always the packing of the solution in the end, because it needs .NET to generate the end result, the end package, which is too bad. Hopefully, we'll see some changes in the future when the Dynamics APIs get, or SDKs go cross-platform. So as you can see here, it's as simple as typing pack in the command line, and it gives you all of the options. So if you want to create a PowerApps Component Framework project, you go pack PCF, and it will ask what action you want to take. So initially, you want to initialize a directory, the new PowerApps Component Framework project. And if you do that, which I will not do because it takes a bit of time, you will be, that's the wrong one, you will get a default solution. So it will give you a default project that starts with an index.ts. So that's your TypeScript file, and it will scaffold the default methods you need to override or implement to get all of the functionality that you need on the page. So you see here that this is a component which extends a standard control in the component framework library. It gives you a constructor, an initialization method, an update view method, and some get outputs method. So if you go through this, the init method, well, what it says in the name, it will allow you, or this code will run before your control is on the page. So you can do fetching of data before you render and things like that. Then there's the update view. Update view gets called for rendering. This is where, or this gets called every time that the PowerApps Component Framework receives an update or receives new information or thinks that it needs to re-render the look and feel. And then there's the destroy method. This is if you want to, if you need to clean up some resources in the end. And there's the ability to get some outputs during your development stages. It comes with with an XML for people that have been doing Dynamics before. This is like an XML that describes stuff in a dynamic solution, and they extended it to allow you to insert your component in here as well. So you have to create a dynamic solution, which is also done by the command line, which is, I believe, pack solution. So you create a solution. In that solution, you reference this control project, and then you do a build and package. And with that package, you can go to Dynamics to install your application, also into PowerApps to install your application or your custom component. Now, we created one that shows a better view of what is possible. In this case, we're showing a grid on Dynamics that will interact with the surroundings. So it will be installed on a cases dashboard or a cases information dashboard. And it will take the existing case, do some call out to an external web service, do some AI on it, and then return with similar cases to the one that's open. So you see there will be a grid build with some columns in there. We do some initialization. We do an update view where we do a rect create element for a grid element, and then we render all of the information. The initialize method and the update view method come with the context parameter. This context parameter describes where this application is or this component is loaded, so you can interact with Dynamics and the Dynamics APIs to fetch additional data. So this allows us to call out to internal APIs or external APIs and fetch the relevant data and put them on the screen for the end user. There's also the most important difference between, well, I most often get a question about why would I need to build a PowerApps Component Framework, and can't I just build a Canvas app and embed it inside a model-driven app or inside another Canvas app? Now, the problem with embedding a Canvas app somewhere is that it's not loaded in line with the page. So when you load it in line, when you load a PowerApps Canvas app on a Dynamics page, it will always be a little bit slower. It has to initialize the call out to PowerApps. It has to do the authentication and things like that. Now with the PowerApps Component Framework, the component is a native part of the page. So it will be rendered as slow or as fast as Dynamics renders the page, or as the rest of the Power App renders the page, because it's considered as being native to that page. So that's all about the PowerApps Component Framework to make it prettier. You can create controls, share them with the end users or the citizen developers, and they can reuse them as much as they want over all of their applications. So that's a good added value for us. Another thing is that we can, oh, I have to switch to the slides first, which is this one. Another thing we can do is putting our complex logic in Azure Resources. As a developer, as a pro developer, we've been doing this for years. Componentize our code, make sure that it's reusable, create code that can be called from different applications or from different parts of an application. And this is what we want to do for Power Platform development as well. And Azure is a prime candidate to put all of this code in there. You can use Azure Functions or Logic Apps to create complex functionality that your citizen developer will never ever be able to create, or at least not with a lot of effort. And he or she has to create it potentially to Power Automate and not as robust as we can create it as a pro developer. So we create this, but then it's our responsibility to expose it to them. So we can put APIs for connecting to modern or legacy systems inside Azure. We can create functions or Azure Functions for hosting our custom logic. We can expose some databases and compute inside Azure. We can do data analysis for data scientists on that data and then expose the result for people to use. And we can even use the Bot Framework Composer to create deep integrations with other Azure services and create a more rich functionality for bots inside the Power Platform. And when we do that, we can deliver these as a service to our citizen developers. They can use what we make available to create better applications faster for their specific use case. We don't have to worry about the front end. They can do that. They can use our building blocks to create applications that will fit their specific use case. Where we as IT probably would find the most generic use case and build that one thing because we only have time to build one application and not one that's tailor-made for a specific department. So when you put all your complex logic in Azure Resources, you have to expose those. And that's where custom connectors come in. So custom connectors are used to expose existing resources in, for example, Azure, but even in other applications that you're using that have an API available, you can create a custom connector that can be used in Power Apps or Power Automate. You can create those from Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code with some tooling that's made available by Microsoft, or you can use the Swagger API or Open API specs to create this custom connector and then share it with all of the users that need to use this functionality. This will mean that your custom connector shows up inside your Power App, for example, when you go to data and you want to connect to an external data source, your custom connector will show up and you can use it to interact with that API. Your end users don't need to know where this API is hosted, how to authenticate, and things like that, because all of that has been handled for them in the custom connector. They just use functionality that's available and build their own awesome application around it. Most of you probably know about how this works, but in Power Automate, if you create a custom connector, you have to go through some steps. So first step is, or first page is that you have to upload an icon and say an icon color and give this thing a description. None of these are required, but this one is. So one thing we know is that graph.microsoft.com doesn't really have an API or a connector. So I'll just use that one as a good example. And then you have the option to describe the authentication. So you can say that there's no authentication, but most APIs will have authentication. You can do basic authentication and give up a username and password. But this thing means that if you put in username and password, users will have to provide it before they are able to use the API. So this is how they will connect. They make a connection with your custom connector. They set up the connection and they have to enter username and password. Same goes for API key of OAuth2, all different methods of authentication that your API might support. So you can expose that in your custom connector. Let's go for no authentication. And then you have to give in the definition. You can create your new actions separately, put in all of the information, the operation ID, and things like that. And in the end result, you will have an action and a trigger, some references, and maybe some policies. But you can also go into a Swagger editor, and you can just copy paste in your Swagger file that already describes the whole of your application. And if you do that, it will generate the connector for you. In the end result, you click on a create connector, and it will show up inside the Power Automate or inside PowerApps for you to use, but you can also share it with the rest of your company. Now, that's a whole lot of work for a pro developer to, first of all, create the API, and then also create the API specs to create the custom connector, share it with everyone. So Microsoft made this a bit simpler. So we also have the ability to create custom connectors directly from Azure API management definitions. If you work in a larger company, or even in a smaller company, Azure API management can be your one entry point into all of your APIs. So it's a front door for all of your APIs. And this can also be used to consolidate your APIs, give them a unique endpoint that will not change, even if you change the backend services after the API. So it's a total API management solution, and it has the ability to export the definition of that API as a connector inside PowerApps and Power Automate. Now, I have one here. So it's my connective API. There's an API described in here. It has some actions available, some operations available in here. And if I need to make sure that I can use it in the Power Platform, I can go copy paste somewhere out of here the whole Swagger definition, go back to what we saw before and create the custom connector based on the Swagger file and things like that. But you can also go behind the three dots, do export. And one of the options that is new is export, create a custom connector in PowerApps and Power Automate. So with just this option, it will very simple create this API management connector, and you don't have to do anything. So this option will put your API in the hands of your users in seconds. The API management connector, sadly, is a premium connector. So you need premium licenses to use the API management connector to call into your external API or the API on API management. Same goes for the custom connectors, which is also part of premium licensing. The HTTP connector is part of premium licensing. So for licensing, they aren't making it easy to connect to your external data, with one notable exception. When you look at Dataverse for Microsoft Teams, if you create applications that run on Dataverse for Microsoft Teams, the API management connector is included in the licensing. And you don't really need to pay for Dataverse for Microsoft Teams either. So you all get that for free as long as you stay inside the Microsoft Teams application. So there are some pros and cons to this approach. There's no manual creation of the connector, and there's no premium license required as long as you stay inside Microsoft Teams, but it also means that you have to stay inside Microsoft Teams. Your application that's in there cannot be used on a mobile device except from within the Microsoft Teams client. So there are some downsides to this approach as well. This is about exposing all of the information that we already have available. We've created some legacy applications, we have APIs for that, and we want to make sure that all of our citizen developers can use it. Now, what will happen when their application is finished? They create an application, it runs in an environment, and it's done. For them, that's okay. They have finalized it, and they can use it. For us as an IT pro or pro dev, we're thinking about how to do application lifecycle management, because this application has become quite useful for the whole company, not just the 10 people that it was initially created for, and that one user that initially created the application decides that it needs additional functionality, so they just tweak the existing application, not realizing that by now hundreds of people are using the application and rely on it from a day-to-day experience. So when that one citizen developer makes a small adjustment, he doesn't necessarily see the impact it has, and you might not really want to publish this directly to all of your users. So one other thing that we've been doing for years is application lifecycle management. How to make sure that something that's in a specific development environment gets transferred over into a production environment so that the end users can use it. A citizen developer is also a developer. They also need to understand what impact it has when they tweak their application and how much it could impact the end users. So it's up to us to define with them an environment strategy. You can create your applications in here, but if you want to roll it out to your business unit, your department, or the whole company, your application has to be somewhere else in a separate environment, which is the production application environment. How do we get the things over there? They have to make sure that everything is in a solution. You might want to put it in source control. You might want to create a build pipeline and a release pipeline that will take all of the source control for a Power App, build it, validate it with the PowerApps solution checker, create a new solution out of it, deploy it into the test environment so people can test it. Only after approval it can be moved on to the production environment, and things like that. This is what we've been doing for years, and this can also be an added value for us. Luckily, Microsoft provides the Power Platform build tools. With the Power Platform build tools, you can see a screenshot in here, they provide a whole set of actions inside Azure DevOps, and there's also a GitHub Actions thing in preview at the moment. So they provide a whole set of actions that you can use to work with Power Apps projects. So it's a solution or an extension you have to install from the Visual Studio Marketplace. And when you do that, it will deliver you a whole set of functionality. Things like the ability to import a solution, backup an environment, copy an environment, create a new environment, like if you do just ad hoc environments for each of your tests. When something needs to be tested, you spin up a new Power Platform environment, you you do the tests, and when the test is done, another step is that the environment gets deleted. You call the Power Platform checker to validate the functionality and the quality of the application that you want to deploy inside the production environment. So this helps you move along and deliver quality applications, even when built on a low-code citizen developer platform. You can still apply a lot of the best practices that we've learned over the years to this tooling as well. And this is also a difference we can make as a pro developer when we create applications together with them, with the citizen developer. Last but not least, an overview of all of the extensibility points inside the Power Platform. So you know the Power Platform is built upon Dataverse and Dataverse for Microsoft Teams, which is a new name for Common Data Service since last week, I believe. And all of the applications for Microsoft have an interaction with it, with the Dataverse, with the data that's in there, can have an interaction with all of that data and the functionalities in there. You can even create your own web UI, or ISVs can create custom applications that aren't even built on top of Power Platform, but can still interact through APIs with the data that's stored in Dataverse. Additionally to Dataverse, you can have a user interface with model apps and canvas apps on there, where you can build custom controls with the PowerApps Component Framework. You can create logic with business rules, Power Automate flows, plugins, and Azure Functions that interact with that common data service. And you can create those plugins for pre and post commit, which is a specific Dynamics construct. Before something happens to the data, you can already act on it, then it gets written away into the database, and then you can do post commitment, you can do additional actions. Those are plugins. You can also create them through the PowerApps Component CLI. Then there's the data model for your common data service, which describes your entities and your records, or your tables and columns, I believe, is the new terminology that we're using in Dataverse. So it's how you store your data, what do you need to store? And you can create new extensions on that. You can create or model your own relation or data model relations. This is also something that end users and citizen developers struggle with. They don't necessarily have the experience on how to model their data to make it reusable, and which columns they need and which fields they need inside of their database. And then there are the custom connectors. So there are already connectors available, but you can also create custom connectors. So I hope that this gives a good overview that there still really is a lot of value of a pro developer, even when a lot of people will start creating applications through this low-code platform. So it's time to stop weeping and thinking that our job will go away. It's time to take our seat at the table of the Power Platform or of low-code development tools and start creating Fusion dev teams, which is a really cool term I believe Microsoft coined, which is a setup where pro developers and citizen developers form a team, not just we'll ask IT to fix this for us, or we'll ask the citizen developer to change this and this. No, it's a together thing. It's #better together. Make sure that it's a teamwork effort, that both pro devs and citizen developers or makers work together to achieve the same goal. Create cool, awesome applications for the business that get used inside and are useful inside of their organizations. And as a pro developer, wrapping this up, this means that we bring a lot of experience and knowledge from years of application development. We have to start creating reusable logic and expose this inside the Power Platform so our citizen developers can use it to create applications. And we can potentially provide custom UX controls that deliver a specific need that the business needs or the citizen developer wants to achieve, and that's not available from out-of-the-box components. And this brings me to the end of the session. Good on time. So thank you for joining. If you've got questions, you can find me on Twitter and on my blog. I still got the stickers to give away. So if you fill in the form at this link that's in here, I might copy and paste it later in the chat as well. If you fill in the form, you will enter a draw. I will pick 2 names out of the form with some randomizer that I found online. And those 2 people will get a discount code for Pimp Your Own Device by Louise Vrees and Elias Struijf. And you get some stickers from me for free, and they will be sent to your home directly from Pimp Your Own Device. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Very interesting topic. Maybe someone can jump in and ask some question by voice or by chat.
I didn't see any questions in chat. But
no real
to
question. Some comment, but not real question.
Well, people seem to like it. That's always a good thing.